na sumusubaybay dito sa Spokes Hour. Ngayon po ay pangatlong araw ng tinatawag na confirmation of charges hearing ni Tatay Digong sa International Criminal Court. At ngayong araw nito, buong araw, ay inaasahan natin na ang mga abogado naman ni Tatay Digong ang magsusumite ng kanilang mga ebidensya sa merito, no? Para patunayan na hindi dapat magtuloy sa full-blown hearing ang kaso ni Tatay Digong. Ano nga ba ho ang confirmation of charges? Ang confirmation of charges po ay hindi pa ho kabahagi ng trial on the merits sa kaso ni Tatay Digong. Ito po ay katumbas ng preliminary investigation sa ating sistema kung saan yung tatlong mahistrado ng pretrial chamber ay susuriin ang mga ebidensya na sinumite ng prosecution at ng depensa para malaman kung meron bang sapat na ebidensya para magpatuloy sa paglilitis si Tatay Digong. Sa ating sistema po, ang piskal na nag-determine ng probable cause. Ang probable cause po ay yung posibilidad na merong ang krimen na nangyari at yung nasasakdal ang posibleng siyang gumawa ng krimen na yan. Ganyan din po ang titignan ng mga mahistrado dito sa ICC at matapos kung meron silang desisyon na merong sapat na ebidensya or substantial evidence para magpatuloy sa trial, ang kaso po ay ililipat na sa trial chamber at doon naman po magpipresenta ng lahat ng ebidensya ng mga partido. Now, dahil ito po ay confirmation of charges, hindi required na lahat ng testigo ay ipresenta ng hukuman. So far, mukhang wala nga po silang ebidensyang ipapakita kundi yung mga videos na na-play na nila sa hukuman. Lahat po ng ebidensya nila ay nandun sa tinatawag nilang pre-trial brief, no, na sinumiti na sa hukuman at lahat po ng mga ebidensyang gagamitin nila ay nasumiti na sa hukuman. Ang nakikita lang po natin ay mga argumento at hindi na pinapakita ang total o kabuuan ng mga ebidensya na sinumiti ng parehong kapartido. Ngayon, nung unang araw po nagsimula at lininaw po ng hukuman kung ano ang confirmation of charges. Ito po ay isang paglilitis para malaman lamang kung merong sapat na ebidensya para magpatuloy sa paglilitis. Now, ang nagpresenta po muna sa opening statements ay ang prosecution, matapos ang mga abogado ng biktima, pagkatapos po ang mga abogado ni Tatay Digong. Doon po sa kanilang mga opening statements ay sinamarize nila kung ano yung kabuuan ng kanilang ebidensya, kung saan parehong panig ay sasabi na sapat ang ebidensya sang-ayon sa prosecution at sang-ayon naman sa depensa, hindi sapat ang ebidensya para magpatuloy ng paglilitis. Ano ba ang mga kinakailangan patunayan ng prosecution para magpatuloy ang kaso sa paglilitis, no? Walang elemento po ng crime against humanity at 3 counts of crimes against humanity ang hinain nila labang kay Tatay Digong ay meron pong mga papatayang nangyari or murder at itong murders pong ito ay isang systematic or widespread attack laban sa mga civilian population sang-ayon sa isang system ng estado or organizational policy. Now, ang sabi po ng prosecution, itong war against drug daw ay isang state-directed campaign, no? At ito ay merong kaalaman at intent ng pinakamataas na opisyalis na ang presidente. Sinasabi nila na si Tatay Digong daw po ay may pananagutan doon sa tinatawag nilang indirect co-perpetration. Yung indirect co-perpetration po ay sinasabi nila yung conspiracy na nagkaroon ng common design, yung common agreement na ipatupad ang war on drugs at ito nga ay sinang-ayunan at pinatupad ni Tatay Digong at ng kanyang mga co-perpetrators na pinangalanan. 8 po ang pinangalanan, kasama na po si Senator Bato, Senator De La Rosa, si dating Secretary Vitt Aguirre, si dating NBI Giran at dating PNP Chief Albayalde at yung isa pang PNP Chief na namatay na. No? Now, ang sabi po nila, si Tatay Digong ay guilty nga for indirect co-perpetration or as part of a conspiracy. Siya daw po ay nag-order. At ang ebidensya pinakita nila ay meron daw sila mga testigo sa DDS na nagsabi na ang Tatay Digong ay nasa taas ng organisasyon ng DDS na lahat ng papatayan ng mga tao na ginagamit nila para pumatay ng tao ay kumukuha ng go signal kay Tatay Digong bago sila pumatay, na si Tatay Digong daw ang nagbibigay ng armas at nagbibigay ng pabuya at garansya na hindi sila mapaparusahan. Now, ang iba pang ebidensya na hinain ng prosecution labang kay Tatay Digong ay yung kanyang mga public speeches. Yung speeches habang siya ay sa Davao na talagang tutugusin niya ang mga drug pusher sa Davao at yung kanyang sinasabi sa eleksyon na kung siya ay mananalo bilang presidente, yung ginawa niya sa Davao ay papatupad niya sa buong Pilipinas. At kinakailangan talagang pulbusin at ubusin ang mga drug pushers at drug addicts sa Pilipinas. No? At sinasabi ng prosecution na bukod dito sa mga speeches nito na sinabi hindi lamang sa labas ng mga institusyon, inulit din ni Presidente itong mga ganitong salita doon sa loob mismo ng Kongreso at Senado matapos siyang manumpa. Nasasabihin lamang ang pawang katotohanan. At ang sinasabi nila, ang pananagutan ni Tatay Digong ay meron pong chain of command influence sa lahat ng mga kapulisan. No? Now, ang prosecution, ang ginamit na ebidensya, yung police operational reports, yung alleged reward system, yung internal communication, yung mga komunikasyon sa loob ng PNP mismo, may mga testigo di umano, including insider accounts, at saka yung mga statistical pattern of killings. No? Now, sinubukang establish ng prosecution yung pattern na pare-parehong modus operandi, yung paggalaw ng DDS at saka yung mga kapulisan di umano matapos maging presidente si Tatay Digong, yung sistema na ginagarantihan na kung sino man ang magpapatupad ng war on drugs ay di mapaparusahan at saka yung pagkakaalam nila na ang target nila ay mga civilian. Pagdating sa jurisdiction, ang sabi ng prosecution ay bagamat nag-withdraw na at hindi nakasapi ang Pilipinas sa Rome Statute, yung mga krimen ay nangyari habang ang Pilipinas ay kasapi pa ng Rome Statute at saka yung jurisdiction daw ng hukuman ay naging kompleto bago pa magbitiw ang Pilipinas bilang miyembro ng ICC. Sinabi naman ng depensa na unang-una wala pong jurisdiction na nga ang ating ang ICC sa Pilipinas dahil nagsimula ang paghingi ng abiso para magpatuloy sa preliminary investigation sa pangalawang taon matapos bumitiw ng Pilipinas sa pagiging miyembro ng ICC. Nakasaad po sa ICC na dapat kung bagamat po pwedeng bumitiw sa pagiging miyembro ng ICC ng isang bansa, kinakailangan yung kooperasyon ay at saka yung jurisdiction ng hukuman ay matrigger sa loob lamang ng isang taon matapos mag-deposit ng instrument of withdrawal. Kaya linabas po ng issue ng mga abogado ni Tatay Digong yung issue ng paglabag sa soberanya ng Pilipinas dahil hindi na nga tayo miyembro ng ICC, bakit lilitisin pa yan? Mga kaso na di umano ay nangyari sa Pilipinas. Ang remedyo sa Pilipinas magsampa ng kaso. Sinabi rin ng abogado ni Tatay Digong na bukas naman ng mga hukuman ang katarungan ay makakamit ng mga biktima kung sila po ay maghahain ng reklamo sa piskalya at sa hukuman ng Pilipinas. At syempre sinabi ng hukuman ng mga abogado ni Tatay Digong kung ano talaga yung basihan kung bakit tayo naging miyembro at isa naman po ako doon sa talagang gumalaw para maging miyembro ang Pilipinas ng ICC. Nung tayo po ay naging miyembro ng ICC, hindi po natin sinabi na binibigay na natin ang kapangyarihan maglitis ng kaso sa ICC. Kung hindi sinasabi natin na ang lokal na hukuman pa rin ang dapat maging court of first instance pagdating sa mga krimen na di umano ay nangyari sa ating mga bansa. Now, pagdating naman sa merito, doon sa opening statement at least ni Kaufman na ngayon ay sususugan niya ng ebidensya, wala daw ebidensyang pinakita na yung pag-atake sa mga napatay sa drug war ay isang atake laban sa sibilyan. At marami daw, kung hindi lahat ng mga naging biktima ng drug war ay hindi mga sibilyan, kung hindi mga drug actors. At wala daw sistema na pinakita na lahat ng mga pag-atake sa mga naging biktima ng drug war ay kabahagi ng isang siste, kung hindi ito raw ay mga independenteng mga gawain ng mga kapulisan. Now, in-emphasize din ng mga abogado ni Tatay Digong na sa confirmation of hearing, kinakailangan magkaroon ng substantial evidence or substantial grounds na hindi napakita ng prosecution. No? At kinakailangan din na hindi lang dapat mag-rely ang prosecution doon sa kanyang ebidensya, doon sa mga anonymous na mga witnesses. Kinakailangan din tignan kung meron kapanipaniwala ba yung mga ebidensyang sinusumite ng prosecution para patunayan itong system na ito. At saka, itong pinakamalakas sigurong sinabi ng prosecution, wala namang kahit anong pagkakasulat na may order si Tatay Digong na patayin ang mga biktima ng drug wars dahil sila ay mga sibilyan. Sinabi rin ng depensa na yung mga salita ni Tatay Digong ay salitang politiko at wala naman talagang intent na pumatay, no? At siyempre, may isang instance na yung isang ebidensyang pinakita nila, isang video na di umano pinanood ni Tatay Digong kung paano pinatay ng DDS ang isang mga biktima nila, ay ngayon ay sinasabi nung kumuha ng video na hindi ganoon ang konteksto. Ang isang konteksto daw diyan ay pinapakita lang kay Tatay Digong yung mga bagong mga state-of-the-art CCTV monitoring facility sa Davao. At hindi yan na pagkakataon para panuorin at purihin ni Tatay Digong ang isang pagpatay sa isang biktima ng DDS. Now, nagtanong po ng mga importanteng tanong na nagbibigay clue sa atin kung anong nasa isipan ng tatlong mahistrado. Unang-una, tinanong kung ano ba yung policy element definition, paano mo sasabihin na ang isang siste ay pinapatupad? Or paano mo mapapatunayan na isang siste ay unang-una mapapatunayan na may ganyang siste at paano yan pinatupad? Pangalawa, tinanong nila kung ang prosecution ba ay nagre-rely sa command responsibility. Bakit? Kasi yung command responsibility, ang elemento niyan, dapat alam noong akusado na may mga krimen na nangyayari at wala siyang ginawa para imbestigahan at parusahan. Ngayon, kung ikaw ay isang civilian leader, kinakailangan patunayan ng prosecution na alam niya na mayroong mga paglabag sa batas. Hindi gaya kapag ikaw ay military commander, may presumption na dapat alam mo kung ano ang ginagawa ng iyong kasundaluhan. Dahil si Tatay Digong ay presidente, dapat patunayan kung alam ba ni Tatay Digong na mayroong illegal na mga pangyayari. Now, meron talagang interest yung mga judges dun sa koneksyon sa pagitan ng mga talumpatan ni Tatay Digong at saka yung mga patayang nangyari. So gusto nilang malaman kung talagang yung mga talumpati na yan ay order para pumatay o di naman kaya usaping politiko lamang. At saka tinanong nila kung ano talaga yung hierarchy ng kapulisan. Kung ang pulis ba, kung ang presidente ba ay gaya sa Armed Forces of the Philippines ay commander-in-chief. Pero ang pulis kasi isang civilian authority. At ang talagang pangunahing opisyalis sa ating PNP, hindi gaya ng AFP, ay ang PNP chief. Okay? Na siya talaga ang nasa taas ng structure ng PNP. Now, importante po yan for purposes of command responsibility. No? Dahil kinakailangan kung sasabihin nila na may command responsibility ang presidente, dapat ipakita ng prosecution na nasa ilalim talaga ng control ng presidente ang PNP. Pero ang pagkakaiba nga niyan, sa Armed Forces of the Philippines, sa chain of the command, ang presidente yung una, sa PNP, it is the PNP chief. Now, ano pong naging importansya nung unang 2 araw ng confirmation of charges? Unang-una, well, yung prosecution po, binuuna niya yung teorya niya na ang war on drugs ay top level na criminality at hindi lamang isolated. Sinasabi nila na ito ay kabahagi ng isang sistema na ang nasa taas ay ang dating presidenteng Duterte. Ang mga abogado naman ni Tatay Digong ay sinabi na ang paglilitis ay politikal, wala ng jurisdiksyon ng hukuman at hindi sapat ang ebidensya para magpatuloy sa paglilitis ayon sa Article 61 ng ICC. Now, makikita natin kung ano ngayon ang pinaglalabanan ng parehong partido. Unang-una, ano ang pagkakaiba sa pulisiya sa salisalita? Mapapatunayan ba talaga ang pulisiya sa pamamagitan ng pananalita? Tatanggapin ba natin ang salita ng politiko o dapat ba talagang tignan natin kung ano yung intensyon ng pananalita? Ang sabi ng prosecution, ang pananalita ay patunay na ang mga patayan na inorder ni Tatay Digong. Ang sabi naman ng kampo ni Tatay Digong, ang pananalita ay para takutin ng mga tao na sumunod sa batas, hindi para pumatay. Now, tignan natin kung ano talaga yung hinahanap ng hukuman dito sa confirmation of charges. Ano bang ibig sabihin ng substantial grounds to proceed? No? Ang substantial grounds ay mas mataas dun sa reasonable grounds to believe na ginagamit pag kumukuha ng warrant of arrest, pero ito ay mas mababa sa beyond reasonable doubt. So, somewhat in between, yan nga po yung katumbas ng probable cause sa ating jurisdiction. Now, ano ang mga naging pasya ng ICC sa mga naunang kaso? Well, tignan natin dito sa kaso ng Lumbanga, Bemba at saka Gagbo sa confirmation na decisions. Ang sabi ng chamber, kinakailangan ay konkreto at nakikitang mga ebidensya. para makita ng malinaw na lahat ng elemento ng crime against humanity ay mapapatunayan at kinakailangan merong link doon sa akusado at ang mga sinasabi niyang mga gawain. So yung mga spekulasyon, yung mga inference, yung mga speculation, yung mga inferences o yung mga uncorroborated anonymous accounts ay hindi sapat para mapatunayan ang reasonable grounds. Now, alalahanin natin kung ano yung elemento ng crimes against humanity. Unang-una, widespread or systematic attack na directed laban sa civilian na populasyon. Alam nila na ito ay directed against sa civilian population at saka ito ay sang-ayon o sa pagpapatupad ng isang pulisiya ng Estado. Kinakailangan patunayan ang maraming patayan na ang biktima ay mga sibilyan at saka magkaroon ng koneksyon dun sa pagpatayan at saka dun sa mga mas malawaking mga atake. Now, yung pamamaraan naman para magkaroon ng pananagutan si Tatay Digong, kinakailangan mapatunayan din yan. Well, kung ikaw po ay gaya ng prosecution, nagre-rely sa indirect co-perpetration, ordering, or contribution dun sa isang pinagkasundoang plano, kinakailangan patunayan ng prosecution ang control ni Tatay Digong dun sa mga gumagawa ng krimen, yung kanyang intensyon na pumatay, at saka yung pagkakaroon ng isang coordinated na plano. Now, ano yung mga kinakailangan? Ito yung mga pinaka-importanting issue na kinakailangan pag-aralan ngayon ng huwes. No? Well, unang-una, kinakailangan magdesisyon ang hukuman kung itong war on drugs ay isa nga bang polisiya na atakihin ng sibilyan. Now, ang problema rito, gaya ng akin nasabi doon sa akin naunang mga komentaryo, nagkaroon na ng kaso sa Supreme Court na kinu-question ang constitutionality ng war on drugs. At in fact, ang mga abogado ng biktima ang siyang nagdulog ng kaso ito sa Supreme Court at na-dismiss naman yung kasong yan. Dahil pag ang isang kaso naman ay dinismiss ng kaso ng Supreme Court, bagamat ito'y kinu-question dahil ito'y labag sa saligang batas, ang ibig sabihin niyan, ang dismissal ay legal yung pulisiyang yon. So, paano ngayon masasabi ng hukuman na yung yung napruebahan nilang polisiya sa likod ng Operation Tukhang or Operation Double Barrel ay illegal at tumatarget ng siste or isang siste na tumatarget ng sibilyan, gayong sinang-ayunan ng ating Supreme Court ang legalidad ng ganyang polisiya. Dahil ang Tukhang naman, katok lang yan at pakiusap para sa mga pinaghihinalaan na nagtutulak na droga na sumuko na. Or, ito nga ba? Ito nga yung sinasabi ni Tatay Digong at ito rin ang sinabi ng Philippine Supreme Court na ito ay isang balidong operasyon ng mga alagad sa batas. Isa pang tanong na kinakailangan sa bigyang kasagutan ng hukuman, yung mga talumpati ba ni Tatay Digong na laban sa droga, ito ba talaga ay kriminal? O ito ba talaga ay para hikayatin ang mga mamamayan na sumunod sa batas? Now, kinakailangan kasi sa mga naunang desisyon na ng ICC, kinakailangan meron talagang organizadong direksyon at hindi po pwedeng mga isolated na mga pananalita lamang. Now, kung talagang magre-rely ang prosecution sa mga speeches lamang nang wala namang nakasulat na direktiba, ito po ay napakahinang ebidensya. Kinakailangan kung sinabi ni Tatay Digong pumatay, dapat patunayan niya na yung order na pumatay ay nakasulat. Now, isa pang problematic dito na sa tingin ko mahihirapan ng prosecution na patunayan yung pag-atake sa sibilyan. Dahil alam ng mga umatake na sila ay sibilyan. Totoo bang civilian targets ang mga suspect sa war on drugs? Now, kung talaga namang may ebidensya na itong mga naging biktima ng patayan ay nanlaban, o di naman kaya sila ay nagpapatupad ng isang legal na police operations, ibig sabihin, hindi nila na-target yung mga mamamayan na yan dahil sila ay mga innocenteng civilian. Kinakailangan din ma-convince ng prosecution ang hukuman kung meron bang talagang link or sufficient proof na yung si Tatay Digong ay may effective control sa lahat ng ginagawa ng mga kapulisan. Talaga bang lahat ng ginawa ng hundreds of thousands na pulis ay talagang nasa effective control ng presidente? Gayong sa hierarchy ng PNP, ay talagang PNP chief ang nasa taas at hindi ang presidente. Meron ba talagang nakasulat na ebidensya para ito ay mapatunayan at saka talaga bang merong link doon sa pagkakakontrol ng Tatay Digong sa pulis at doon sa mga patayan. Uulitin ko po, no, kung wala pong nakasulat na directive galing kay Presidente, talagang kinakailangan patunayan ng kanyang prosecution ng kaso niya doon sa pattern ng ebidensya, witness testimony, at saka yung inference from public statements na ayon sa mga naunang desisyon ng ICC ay hindi sapat. Siyempre, nandyan pa rin yung issue ng jurisdiction. Bagamat nag-issue na ng desisyon ng pretrial chamber na inaantay ngayon ng desisyon ng appeals chamber, kinakailangan i-address pa rin ng hukuman kung anong epekto ng pagiging illegal ng pamamaraan para mahuli si Tatay Digong at saka yung pag-abuso nga sa proseso. No? At saka siyempre, yung katunayan na bukas naman ng mga hukuman sa Pilipinas, bakit dinidinig ito ng ICC? Now, ano ang mga naging naunang desisyon na ng ICC? Well, doon sa mga nabasa kong desisyon, no, meron talagang mga charges na hindi na-confirm kasi nga mahina yung ebidensya. Now, hinihingi ng ICC yung aktual na ebidensya para mapatunayan na yung mga nasasakdal ay nasa likod ng mga di umanong mga krimen na nagawa. Hindi sila nagre-rely sa pattern alone. Okay? Mas gusto nilang makita kung merong ang nakasulat na ebidensya na pagkakautos noong nasasakdal. So, paano ngayon sa tingin ko magpo-proceed ang mga judges on the basis of what the prosecution has presented alone? Siguro yung mga kalaban ni Tatay Digong, ba't ka nagsasalita? Hindi mo pa narinig ang sabi ng defense. Kasi ang defense wala namang papatunayan at this stage. Ang prosecution talaga ang dapat magpatunay na merong sapat na ebidensya at tapos na sila magpresenta ng kabuuan ng kanilang presidente. So, paano magpo-proceed ang mga maestrado? Well, una-una, kailangan i-confirm nila. Dapat makonvince sila na merong sapat na ebidensya na nagpapakita na yung pattern ng patayan ay sang-ayon nga sa isang systematic attack laban sa mga inosenteng sibilyan. Tatanungin nila, yung mga biktima ba talagang inosenteng mga sibilyan? Tatanungin nila, talaga bang pulisiya na patayin ang mga inosenteng sibilyan? At tama ba na talagang itong mga patayan ito ay dahil kay Tatay Duterte? So, sa tingin ko so far, sa ebidensya na pinresinta ng prosecution at sa naunang mga desisyon ng ICC, malabo na magkaroon ng confirmation charges maski hindi pa natin naririnig ang ebidensya ni Tatay Digong dahil in the first place, ang prosecution naman talaga ang dapat magpatunay kung meron talagang substantial evidence. So maya-maya lang, now, although ako ay very hopeful sa panig ni Tatay Digong, huwag natin kakalimutan din na hindi naman kinakailangan ng prosecution na patunayan yung ebidensya beyond a reasonable doubt. No? Kinakailangan lang nila magpresenta ng isang coherent na teorya na merong sapat na ebidensya at meron talagang pag-uutos si Tatay Digong beyond yun sa mga sinasabi niya. So, pero ang pinakamalakas nga ng sandata ng depensa at itong inaasahan nating depensa na manggagaling ngayon sa kampo ni Tatay Digong ay walang policy na mapapakita na patayin ang inosenteng sibilyan at wala talagang koneksyon doon sa mga patayan nangyari sa mga binitawang salita ni Tatay Digong. So yan po ang ating summation sa 2 araw. Maya-maya lang po, tayo po ay magpo-proceed na sa live coverage natin ng ating trial ni Tatay Digong. Chine-check ko lang po kung meron na tala yung live coverage feed dahil mamaya po ay kung may live coverage feed na meron naman po tayong tao dun sa ICC na nagdidikit sa atin. No? So tignan lang po natin kung meron na. At kung meron na po, bibitiw na tayo sa ating komentaryo. Magbe-break po ulit ito ng 11 o'clock at tayo po ay magpapatuloy ng ating live coverage pagdating po ng 11 o'clock, no, kung saan sila ay magre-recess. Pero ngayon po, wala pa pong live feed na pumapasok, so antay-antay lang po natin. So far, aking assessment, kulang sa substantial evidence ng prosecution at dapat mapalaya si Tatay Digong. Maya-maya po, babalik tayo para sa ating live coverage. Meron ba tayong mga around 15 minutes? Tingnan po natin ang mga sabi ng ilang mga ating texters. Kaya lang po, ang bilis. Gary Fonterilla, Duterte pa rin. Annabel Pepito Bangkong, tama.
To a press release, OTP tab 108, in which the police proclaimed that 32 people were killed in Bulacan big-time operations, and then went on to refer to this as one single operation in which 32 victims were killed by the police in Bulacan. But what Mr. Jeremy failed to tell you, Your Honours, is that one of the prosecution's own witnesses explained clearly that he investigated these deaths in an official capacity soon after the killings and found that 33 people were actually killed in different municipalities and provinces in central Luzon, but that their bodies were delivered to Bulacan. This was not, as Mr. Jeremy suggested, a single incident of mass murder, but rather an improper aggregate of a series of law enforcement operations over the course of 24 hours, executed in large geographical area, and for which we have no evidence in the case record. There's no evidence on the perpetrators, victims, motives, manner of attacks, methodology, in essence, nothing to link them to an alleged fantasy common plan. Everything is just stitched together enough to give it a veneer of organization. I now turn to incidents reflecting documented armed confrontations. And as mentioned when I first turned to this count, the documentary record, which has not been displaced by any evidence proffered by the prosecution, reflects attempted arrests, resistance, and responsive use of force. And you've just seen some of the documents up there on the screen. Let's turn briefly to Incident 17, for which the prosecution has relied on a witness who stated that the planting of evidence was an open secret in the locality and province more generally. However, another witness, working in the same locality, P1208, states otherwise, that he was never involved in illegal operations resulting in deaths, was not aware of extrajudicial killings disguised as lawful operations, and confirms that there were no standing orders to kill. The operational objective, he explains, was arrest. Lethal force only when the circumstances required it. And you can find this information in Defense tab 96. And we see this pattern again and again and again. In Incident 40, for example, P1131, who worked with the individual alleged to have shot the suspect, stated clearly that the killings occurred only in circumstances of lawful use of self-defense. That can be found at Defense tab 74, and you can see it on the screen as well. This type of testimonial evidence is also corroborated by documentary and forensic evidence. Incident 15, the prosecution again resorts to its usual pro forma narrative of staged killings or nanlabans. But what it has not done, of course, is prove this. Whereas I urge Your Honours to look at the screen, where you can see detailed documentary evidence about how this incident came about, and I summarise: a spontaneous exchange of fire after the suspect discharged a firearm.
Vous utilisez ce ton-là.
J'essaierai, madame, mais j'en suis pas sûr si je peux conclure dans les 20 minutes. Oui, c'est possible. OK. Nous essaierons, madame.
Ouais, donc vous avez la parole.
Merci
C'est
beaucoup.
toujours vous. Ouais. Voilà.
Across incidents 15 through 49, the Chamber will repeatedly encounter contemporaneous buy-bust or warrant-based documentation, reported exchanges of fire, gunshot residue findings, ballistic testing, immediate hospital transport, internal investigations, and in some cases, prosecution and conviction of officers. Against all of this evidence that you've just seen on the screen here, the prosecution offers single insider accounts of alleged stagings, uncorroborated assertions of weapons planting and nanlabans, unsupported by any forensic evidence, often speculative, frequently contradicted by the alleged co-participants, or yet, more often, complete silence from the alleged co-participants, as they were never even questioned about the incident. And most importantly, despite Mr. Jeremy's assertions on Tuesday, wherein he claimed that the police reports were repeatedly falsified to legitimate the operations as acts of self-defense, copy-paste reports in which victims were frequently blamed for their own deaths, there is zero proof, none, that the only existing contemporaneous documentary evidence is fabricated or unreliable. No proof whatsoever of this supposed falsification in the entire case record. And on this point, let us just clarify a basic principle, that a state document with the appropriate stamps and signatures and what have you is prima facie reliable, or in other words, it carries a presumption of administrative regularity. And if the prosecution seeks to displace that document and call the entire state apparatus into question, then the burden rests on it to produce credible, objective evidence rebutting that presumption. Bare allegations or reliance on single prosecution witnesses cannot suffice to overcome this presumption of authenticity and correctness, nor should the burden shift to the defense to prove that those documents are not falsified. Now, we do not deny that in some instances the record may reveal unlawful conduct by individual officers. One single operation in which 32 victims were killed by the police in Bulacan. But what Mr. Jeremy failed to tell you, Your Honours, is that one of the prosecution's own witnesses explained clearly that he investigated these deaths in an official capacity soon after the killings and found that 33 people were actually killed in different municipalities and provinces in central Luzon, but that their bodies were delivered to Bulacan. This was not, as Mr. Jeremy suggested, a single incident of mass murder, but rather an improper aggregate of a series of law enforcement operations over the course of 24 hours executed in large geographical area and for which we have no evidence in the case record. There's no evidence on the perpetrators, victims, motives, manner of attacks, methodology, in essence, nothing to link them to an alleged fantasy common plan. Everything is just stitched together enough to give it a veneer of organization. I now turn to incidents reflecting documented armed confrontations. And as mentioned when I first turned to this count, the documentary record, which has not been displaced by any evidence proffered by the prosecution, reflects attempted arrests, resistance, and responsive use of force. and you've just seen some of the documents up there on the screen. Let's turn briefly to Incident 17, for which the prosecution has relied on a witness who stated that the planting of evidence was an open secret in the locality and province more generally. However, another witness, working in the same locality, P1208, states otherwise, that he was never involved in illegal operations resulting in deaths, was not aware of extrajudicial killings disguised as lawful operations, and confirms that there were no standing orders to kill. The operational objective, he explains, was arrest, lethal force only when the circumstances required it. And you can find this information in Defence tab 96. And we see this pattern again and again and again. In Incident 40, for example, P1131, who worked with the individual alleged to have shot the suspect, stated clearly that the killings occurred only in circumstances of lawful use of self-defence. That can be found at Defence tab 74, and you can see it on the screen as well. This type of testimonial evidence is also corroborated by documentary and forensic evidence. Incident 15, the prosecution again resorts to its usual pro forma narrative of staged killings or nanlabans. But what it has not done, of course, is prove this. Whereas I urge your honours to look at the screen, where you can see detailed documentary evidence about how this incident came about, and I summarise: a spontaneous exchange of fire after the suspect discharged a firearm, ballistics testing of the officer's weapon, affidavits by the police officers involved, and formal review and investigation of the officer who fired his weapon. Now, I'm not going to sit here and bore you with all the evidence we have on every single one of these incidents, but what I will tell you, Your Honours, is that we have this type of forensic evidence proving attempts, arrests, armed resistance, and responsive and sometimes disciplined use of force in no less than 13 incidents. I don't know where Mr. Butoyan got the idea from that there's no forensic evidence left in the case record. And may we remind you, Your Honours, until the prosecution proves otherwise, which it has not, these state documents remain prima facie, authentic, and reliable. For incidents substantiated by a single witness narrative and unconfirmed by alleged co-participants, I refer Your Honours to no less than 9 incidents. One prosecution witness, P1160, is the sole testimonial evidence for at least 3 incidents, while another 6 incidents are premised entirely on the testimony of P3. Now, what's interesting about these incidents is that P3 alleged that he was only one of a group of 3 or 4 perpetrators, and these other perpetrators are actually also prosecution witnesses. Yet none of the other witnesses corroborated his version of events. Not one. A couple of incidents alleged by the prosecution appear on its own evidence to be unrelated to drug enforcement, and thus questionably part of the fantasy common plan or organizational policy. For this, I would refer you to incidents 31 and 41, which involved targeting of 2 individuals, again, because of non-drugs related conduct. I'm not sure whether I can mention the type of conduct without revealing the identity, so I shall refrain from doing so. The prosecution has not presented any evidence to substantiate any nexus to anti-drug operations in either of these incidents. And for this, I refer you to D36, tab 158, at page 4. On the perpetrator's own account, the trigger for the killing was a personal grievance relating to property damage. There are numerous incidents against unidentified or improperly identified victims. The victim in incident 45 is described as a minor, just as in incident 38, another incident on which Mr. Jeremy focused on Tuesday. And, by the way, on the subject of the killing of children, of course it ticks the right boxes for the prosecution insofar as it pulls the heartstrings. But apart from Kian de los Santos, the prosecution has not, despite its emphasis on children, presented to this chamber during these proceedings any evidence that even one victim, apart from Kian, in its 49 incidents was a minor. No birth certificates, no corroborative evidence, nothing. While incidents presented as involving minors are indeed grave, Article 61 requires proof, not emotion. It is for the prosecution to prove that the children were involved in these incidents, and not for the defence, once again, to prove a negative. Now, this evidentiary deficit extends even further. The Bulacan Provincial Office provided a certificate indicating that it had no record corresponding to the names of the victims, whose names have been redacted on the slide, which we will show you. Okay, but we'll pass on. But their names have been redacted. And these are alleged police killings, yet no operational report. Indeed, no contemporaneous documentation whatsoever has been produced. So on what does the prosecution base its claim that these individuals were murdered by the police other than P3? The prosecution relies almost exclusively on the account of P3 echoed by P8. And this is rather ironic. Does the prosecutor claim that P3 is corroborated by P8 when the source of P8's information is in fact P3 himself? Bootstrapping logic, once again. The alleged direct perpetrator, P1201, stated during his interview that he had never participated in an operation involving a child. The other officer allegedly present during both incidents, P1131, was never questioned about these events by the prosecution. And that omission, we submit, is not neutral. These incidents, therefore, cannot simultaneously be characterized as manifestations of a centrally designed OTBT-based common plan, because they quite clearly fall outside of that plan. And it does not reflect what the prosecution on Tuesday described as the systematic features of a national network operation. Instead, according to P3, the motive was personal financial gain through the sale of bodies. And if P3's account is accepted, it reflects opportunistic actions for personal gain of the most macabre kind. As held in Al-Hassan, an opportunistic act committed for personal profit without more falls outside the common plan. Now, just to finish up quickly on the issue of identity, in Incident 43, even the alleged perpetrators are not identified. Without identification, the Chamber cannot assess their institutional affiliation, chain of command, or attempt to make any possible linkage to Mr. Duterte. One more thing, Your Honours. The prosecution focused for some time on Incident 23. I can mention his name, Mr. Benjamin Vizda. Mr. Jeremy displayed compelling footage of Mr. Vizda's arrest and then the fact that while handcuffed, he attempted to grab the gun of one of the policemen, leading to a struggle and prompting the motorbike to fall over and the policeman to shoot Mr. Vizda twice in self-defense. And that this PNP report appears to be corroborated by another prosecution witness, whose testimony fully aligns with the substance of the police document. Mr. Jeremy claimed that the PNP reports were false, relying solely on the allegation of one witness that the scene was staged. This witness claimed that the handcuffs were removed from the victim, that the body was loaded on the tricycle a few minutes after being shot and then brought to the hospital. However, his account is contradicted by the very picture the prosecution has shown you on Tuesday. Indeed, it appears that the prosecution is submitting documentary evidence which undermines its own witness's testimony. As you can see here, handcuffs are on. The body is on the ground rather than on a tricycle. Photojournalists are also present. This contradiction was even noted by the prosecution's investigators at the time of the interview and was put to the witness. And when confronted by the investigators, what did that witness say? I don't know if I can. The prosecution must still establish vertical linkage to Mr. Duterte. But there is no evidence that Mr. Duterte knew of Vista, that he directed the operation, or that he approved its planning, nor has the prosecution demonstrated that the incident would not have occurred in substantially the same way absent his alleged contribution. 2 minutes left. Without proof of control over the commission of the specific crime, Article 25, 3A cannot be satisfied. And finally, with regard to count 3, the prosecution's witnesses themselves concede that there was no formal approval process. Targets were selected without validation, officers acted for personal reasons, and decisions were taken locally. All of this destroys the assertion that there was a mutually agreed common plan. I will elaborate. P1160 claims hierarchical transmission of policy within the police, while simultaneously acknowledging officers' autonomous killings for personal motives. Those propositions cannot comfortably coexist. P3 explains that certain officers acted outside any common plan and for opportunistic reasons. See Incident 38. In Incident 49, P1207 attributes instructions to local officers without evidence of communication or direction from higher authorities. And most significantly, P1207 P1207 states after a certain death, once again abiding by the redactions, Tokhang operations and killings ceased. This indicates, Madam President, Your Honours, that dependence on specific individuals, not an enduring organisational policy. A system-wide common plan cannot depend on the continued presence of a non-fungible local official. And with this, I conclude.
Merci beaucoup, Maître Kaufmann. Tous les arguments du fond ont été maintenant attendus. Nous allons prendre maintenant une pause d'une demi-heure.